close your eyes and relax. In the shadows, things are hiding that are better left unseen. Tonight, I'll tell you a story that will take you to a place where reality and fear intertwine. But before we begin, make sure no one is watching. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to give a like. It helps me keep creating new dark tales for you. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from and which story has been the scariest for you. And now, let's begin. I remember everything. I checked into the Sycamore Pines Motel just past 9. It was the kind of place that looked better in headlights than daylight. A low U-shaped strip of faded doors and cracked window blinds. The air smelled like warm asphalt and stale cigarette smoke, and the night was humming with the buzz of a vending machine that hadn't worked in years. I didn't ask questions. I just signed the paper, took the brass key with the peeling green tag, and walked to room 12. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect. A bed with a sag in the middle, a chipped dresser with a bolted-down TV, and a small table stained with coffee rings. The air conditioner rattled like it was coughing up its last breath, and the wallpaper peeled at the corners like it was trying to escape. I liked it. There was something honest about places that didn't pretend to be more than they were. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my boots, and turned on the lamp. The light was yellow, sickly almost, but warm in a way that made the corners of the room blur. I poured a couple fingers of bourbon into a plastic cup from my bag. Not for the taste, just for the ritual. I always did this when I was passing through places, like I was drawing a border between the world outside and whatever this was. I sat by the window and looked out. Across the parking lot, another room glowed with the same weak yellow light, and I wondered who else might be holed up in this forgotten pocket of highway. A truck passed on the interstate in the distance, its rumble low and long like thunder that hadn't quite decided where to fall. I wasn't tired, but I felt worn down, the kind of tired that lives in your bones, not your eyes. I hadn't spoken to anyone all day, not really. Just the gas station clerk who handed me change and mumbled something about the weather. It didn't bother me. Silence was easier than talking lately. People expected things in conversation. Smiles, lies, little reassurances. I didn't have any of those left. I was alone, sure. But it wasn't loneliness. Not exactly. It was something quieter than that. Something older. Like the feeling you get when you realize you've stopped waiting for someone to call. I was about to take another sip when I heard it. A soft click, like a switch being flipped somewhere in the room behind me. I turned, but nothing had changed. The lights still buzzed overhead. The air conditioner kept up its erratic wheeze. Probably just settling, I thought. These old places were full of small, dying sounds. Plastic expanding, pipes breathing, electricity humming through rusted wires. Still, it had felt too deliberate. Not random, not ambient, like something mechanical had made up its mind. I stood and crossed the room, dragging my hand across the top of the dresser out of habit. A texture check. Something to ground me. Dust, uneven and sticky, like someone had spilled soda and never bothered to wipe it clean. I checked the TV, half expecting it to be on. It wasn't. Its black screen reflected my shape in that warped, glassy way. Just a blur of shoulders and shadows. The clock radio on the nightstand had reset itself. The red digits blinked 1200 over and over, rhythmically, like a pulse. I hadn't touched it. Maybe the power had flickered, but the lamp hadn't gone out. I watched it blink for a moment. The longer I stared, the more I felt like it was ticking inward, not forward, like something had stopped instead of started. My phone buzzed. One short, dry vibration. I walked over expecting a text, or maybe a weather alert, but the screen was blank. No missed calls, no notifications. Just the lock screen, 9:41 p.m., and my face barely visible in the reflection. Weird, but not impossible. These things happened. Motels were dead zones for signal, and my battery was low. Could have been a phantom alert. Happens when you're on edge or just tired enough to notice stuff you usually don't. I shrugged it off and tossed the phone onto the bed. It landed face down, silent. Still, the air felt thicker now. Not colder, not exactly, just heavier. Like the room had inhaled and hadn't quite exhaled yet. I rubbed the back of my neck and walked back to the window, half expecting something to have shifted out there. But the parking lot was the same. Empty. Still. That other room's yellow light had gone out. I hadn't seen it happen. I didn't notice it at first. I was brushing my teeth with the motel's chalky tap water, staring at the mirror without really seeing myself. My reflection looked off. Not wrong. Just misaligned, like a picture that hadn't been hung straight. I leaned in to fix the thought in my head, and that's when I saw it. My toothbrush was different. Same color, same brand, but newer, clean. No worn bristles, no faded grip. I'd been using the same one for weeks, and it looked like it had been chewed on by a dog. This one looked store-bought, untouched. I stood there, foaming toothpaste in my mouth, and just stared at it. It sat in my hand, like it belonged to someone else. Had I packed a new one without realizing? Had I stopped at a drugstore and forgotten? That didn't sound like me. My habits were fossilized. Same bag, same items, packed in the same order every time I hit the road. And yet, there it was, unmistakably mine, but undeniably not. I rinsed and walked back into the room. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message. "You okay?" No name. Just the number. Unknown, but familiar. One digit off from my sister's old number. She'd changed it years ago, after we stopped talking. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, heartbeat ticking faster now. I didn't reply. Instead, I checked my contacts. Scroll. And then I saw it. My own name. Not at the top, but halfway down the list, wedged between names I didn't recognize. The number listed under it was mine. But the contact photo, I never set one, was an old picture of me I hadn't seen in years. Back when I had longer hair and still wore that leather jacket. The photo was taken outside my apartment. I didn't remember anyone taking it. I locked the phone, set it face down again. My mouth was dry. Nothing outside had changed. The lights hummed. The air conditioner groaned. Cars passed like distant ghosts, but something had tilted inside me. A slow shift, like the floor had moved half an inch while I wasn't looking. Someone, or something, was reaching in. Not from outside the world, from just behind the skin of it. It happened just after midnight. I'd tried to sleep, left the lamp on, let the bourbon numb the edges. But my eyes wouldn't stay closed. I kept feeling like something in the room was listening, not watching. Listening, like my breath, the rustle of the sheets, the shift of my weight on the mattress, all of it was being recorded in real time by something that didn't breathe back. Eventually I got up, sat on the edge of the bed. The air was still. I told myself I was being dramatic, too tired, too wired. Just ride it out, check out in the morning, disappear again. That's when I heard it, from the bathroom. My voice. It was faint, muffled, but it was mine. Not speaking, whispering. A sentence low and wet, like someone trying to talk through a mouthful of water. I froze, strained. Silence. Then, again. The same rhythm, the same breath. It wasn't a playback. It was live. I stood, moved slow, heart banging so hard it felt like it was shaking the floor beneath me. I stepped toward the bathroom, the lights still off in there. The sound didn't repeat, but something had changed in the smell. The air was damp, wrong. Not mildew or mold, something more sterile, like a hospital hallway that hadn't been cleaned right. I flipped the light on. Empty. The mirror was fogged over. Not completely, just a soft oval, like someone had leaned close and breathed on it. I hadn't used the hot water. My toothbrush was gone. I backed out, turned, grabbed my phone off the nightstand, unlocked it. The home screen was the same, except for one new photo in the gallery. My stomach knotted before I even opened it. It was a picture of me, asleep, in the motel bed. Same sheets, same lamp, same shadows. Taken from the foot of the bed, like someone had stood there, watching. My phone hadn't left the room. I checked the door, still locked, chain still latched, and yet I wasn't alone. Something had been here, close enough to fog glass. Close enough to take a picture, close enough to whisper my own voice back to me. And it wasn't done. By morning, I was already driving. Didn't shower, didn't check out. Just grabbed my bag, left the key on the bed, and got behind the wheel. I drove west without looking at the rear view. Windows down, radio off. The phone, off, battery pulled, wrapped in foil, jammed into the glove box. Paranoia? Maybe. I didn't care. Stopped at a gas station 2 towns over. Bought a burner phone. Paid in cash. Got a hotel on the outskirts of a different city. Somewhere with cameras, fluorescent lights, other people's noise. I set up motion sensors from my trunk stash. Old gear from worse years. Taped the peephole. Wiped every surface. Left the TV on for background chatter, sound masking, even jammed a chair under the doorknob. That first night, nothing happened. I told myself I'd imagined it. The voice, the photo, the breath on the glass. I hadn't, but I told myself I had. It made eating easier. The second night, the TV turned itself off at 2:13 a.m. Remote was on the floor, batteries removed. I'd done it myself. Third night, the burner rang once. No caller ID. I didn't answer. When I opened the call log the next morning, there was no record, but a new contact had appeared. Emmy, no number. Just the word. All caps. No option to delete. I drove again. Another state. Another name at check-in. Didn't matter. It came anyway. The motion sensor lit up at 3:42 a.m. Room empty. Door untouched. Still locked. But the mirror had fog on it again. I hadn't used the bathroom. My bag was zipped wrong. My socks folded in pairs I never fold. On the nightstand, my lighter, the one I lost 3 years ago in a snowstorm in Utah, just sitting there like it never left. That was when it hit me. This wasn't a place-bound thing. It wasn't tied to that motel, or the number, or even the phone. It was attached to me, following like a shadow with memory. And it didn't care about locks, or walls, or towns. It wasn't chasing me. It was with me, like it always had been. I wasn't running from it. I was carrying it. I checked into a roadside inn outside Albuquerque. Desert wind, empty lot, no cameras, just silence and sun-bleached vacancy. That night, I didn't sleep. Sat with my back to the wall, eyes on the door, knife on my thigh. At 3:03 a.m., the landline rang. No one had that number. I hadn't even noticed the phone until it rang. I picked up. Didn't speak. A pause. Then my own voice, calm and flat, said, "You can stop now. I remember everything." Click. I didn't move. Couldn't. When I finally looked down, the knife was gone, and the bed was warm, like someone had just gotten up. The Watcher. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above me as I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands wrapped around a cracked mug of coffee. The room was small, but functional. Faded wallpaper peeling at the corners, a faded painting of a forest on the wall, the kind of thing you'd find in any roadside motel, offering an illusion of comfort. Outside, the hum of cars on the highway was constant, but muffled, as if it belonged to another world. The stale air smelled faintly of bleach and something that had been left too long, probably the carpet. I'd been driving for hours, the miles stretching out behind me like an endless snake of asphalt. The GPS had led me here, a nameless town with no real reason to stop, except for the need to rest. The bed was too soft, the pillows too thick, but the silence was heavy, the kind of silence that presses down on you after too many nights alone in places like this. My only company was the sound of my own breathing, and the occasional creak of the building as it settled into the night. I ran my fingers along the edge of the nightstand, feeling the dust gather there like forgotten memories. The small TV on the dresser flickered to life with a grainy static image before I turned it off, too tired to care. No one was looking for me. No one ever did. The life I left behind was still there somewhere, but it had faded, and I was okay with that. It felt easier to exist in the quiet, to keep moving, one stop at a time. I glanced at the clock. 2:13 a.m., the kind of hour where everything feels a little off, a little too still. I turned on the bedside lamp, its soft glow casting shadows across the room. My eyes lingered on the small window, where the dark beyond seemed almost welcoming. Nothing happened at 2:13 a.m. Nothing ever did. I took another sip from the mug and waited for sleep to find me, but it didn't come. Not tonight. I leaned back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the air conditioner a constant companion. My mind was beginning to drift when I heard it, a faint tapping, almost like fingernails against glass. At first I thought it was just the wind, maybe some loose part of the building reacting to the heat, but the tapping continued, persistent in its rhythm. I glanced around the room, trying to pinpoint the source. It seemed to be coming from the window, but that didn't make any sense. The curtains were closed tightly, and the window itself was too high up for any casual breeze to cause a sound like that. I stood up and walked over to it, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out into the parking lot below. Nothing. No car, no person, just the dull stretch of empty space under the pale glow of the streetlight. I shrugged, chalking it up to my imagination playing tricks. The motel was old, after all. I returned to the bed, but before I could settle back in, the phone on the nightstand buzzed. A single vibration, nothing more. I looked at it, half expecting a message, but there was nothing. No missed calls, no notifications, just that brief buzz, like a reminder of something forgotten. Maybe it had just been a glitch. Phones did that sometimes, right? I turned it over, tapping the screen to check the time again. 2:20 a.m. I sighed and tossed it back onto the nightstand, but the tapping from the window resumed. It was slightly louder now, a little more urgent, but still nothing I couldn't explain away. Maybe it was an insect, or something caught in the breeze outside. It couldn't be anything else. The room felt different now, though. The air seemed thicker, as if it were holding its breath. But again, nothing to worry about. Just a long night. I pulled the blanket over me, trying to shake off the odd feeling that had settled at the back of my mind. I was just tired. That's all. Just tired. I closed my eyes. The tapping continued, but this time, I couldn't seem to ignore it. I had almost managed to drift back into the haze of sleep when something else changed. This time, it was my phone. It buzzed again, more insistent this time, vibrating against the wooden surface of the nightstand. I reached over, half expecting it to be a spam call or a missed notification, but when I looked at the screen, my blood froze for a moment. The name on the display wasn't mine. It said, Carter. I didn't know anyone named Carter, at least not anymore. My finger hovered above the screen, the logical side of my brain telling me it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a wrong number, maybe a glitch. But my gut told me something else. Something far less innocent. The number was familiar, though. A twinge of recognition poked at the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. The phone stopped vibrating as I stared at the name. No message, no missed calls. I glanced over to the clock on the wall, 2:32 a.m. I looked back at the screen, trying to shake the unease creeping into my chest. I didn't want to call the number. I didn't want to know what it meant. I couldn't ignore the growing sense that it was directed at me. There was no reason I should be this shaken over something so trivial, but I was. I stood up and grabbed my jacket, slinging it over my shoulders. The air outside the window felt colder now, even though I hadn't opened it. I had the strange urge to check my things, my bag, the small wallet I always carried, but when I did, everything was in place, just as it should be. My keys, my ID, the little notebook I kept with me. I couldn't help but notice, though, that the notebook was open, flipped to a page I hadn't written on. The words were there, scrawled in someone else's handwriting. You've been here before. The blood drained from my face as I stared at it. That was impossible. I'd never been to this town before, not in my life. I reached for the notebook, but my hands shook as I snapped it shut. No way, it was just a sick joke, a coincidence. But then, I noticed something else. My contact list, a name I didn't recognize, had been added. Carter. I felt the walls close in around me. The room suddenly too small, too quiet. I tried to breathe, but it was hard to. The tapping from the window had stopped, but the silence felt heavy, as if the air itself was waiting for something. My phone lay there, still buzzing, vibrating once more. This was real. It was happening. And I was the only one who didn't understand why. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like someone or something was waiting just behind me, breathing quietly, waiting for the right moment. My fingers fumbled with the phone, the screen glowing in my trembling hand. I turned it over, trying to distract myself, but the screen caught something in the corner of my eye. In the reflection of the phone's screen, there was a figure in the doorway. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. The room was empty, as it had been since I walked in. The door was closed, the shadows outside the thin crack between the frame and the wall, as still as the rest of the room. But I had seen it. The figure, blurry but distinct, had been standing there, watching me. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was more like a shape, dark and formless, like it couldn't quite hold its own shape, slipping in and out of focus. I blinked, and it was gone. I had to get out of here. My chest tightened as I stood, grabbing the jacket again, pulling it on with shaky hands. I rushed to the door, but just as my fingers gripped the handle, the lights flickered. Not the usual flicker from a faulty bulb or a brief surge of power. This was something different. They stuttered, going out completely before coming back on, dimmer than before. I froze. The room was even quieter now, like the air itself had stopped moving. I turned back to the bed. The bag was gone. I hadn't touched it since I arrived. It had been sitting by the foot of the bed, in plain sight. But now it was gone, vanished into thin air. I scanned the room in disbelief, but there was no sign of it. Nothing. The bed was untouched, the dresser still in place, but my bag, it was just gone. The air in the room grew colder. I could see my breath now, little puffs in the dim light. I turned, frantic, to the window, thinking maybe I had left it outside somehow, but the blinds were drawn tight. The streetlight outside flickered, as if it were struggling to keep its light. A knock came from the door, just one, sharp and deliberate, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I backed away slowly, my legs unsteady, my heart racing. No one was out there. No one had knocked. I didn't move for a long moment. I couldn't. The sensation of being watched, of being intruded upon, was suffocating now. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, the silence pressing in on me. I felt like I was no longer alone in my own body, like something had taken root in the space around me, slipping under my skin, waiting. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a number I didn't recognize. It was a message. The screen flickered to life with a single line, "I see you." And in that moment, I knew. The walls were closing in, and there was no escape. I didn't waste a second. My hands were steady, too steady for the chaos in my head. I grabbed the phone, flipping it over and pressing the power button. The screen went black, but I didn't feel any relief. It didn't help. It wasn't enough. I packed what I could, moving quickly but methodically, like I had done 100 times before in my life. But this time, there was no rush to leave, no relief in leaving. It didn't matter where I went. I pulled the blinds open to check the parking lot. Still no sign of anyone, no one watching. The quiet hum of the world outside seemed untouched by what was happening inside. But I knew. I could feel it. It was still there. I could almost hear the sound of something following me, just out of earshot. I drove. The drive to the next town took hours. I told myself it would be different, that I just needed to leave, to get away. Maybe it was just some kind of mistake, a trick of the mind. But with each mile I put between myself and that motel, the weight in my chest didn't ease. It pressed harder. I arrived at a cheap hotel, another roadside stop. I didn't care where I was anymore. My room was quieter than the last one, emptier. But still, something was off. The air, thicker than it should have been. The walls felt like they were closing in. The same gnawing feeling crept back in, like I was being watched. I set up cameras in the room. They were old, basic models, nothing special. I needed evidence, something to show that it wasn't all in my head. That night, I stayed awake, watching the screens in the dim light. But nothing happened. The cameras captured nothing. I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. The exhaustion clung to me, but I couldn't escape the feeling of something pressing in from all sides. The sensation of being followed didn't fade. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something there, someone. But there was no one. By morning, I packed again and left. I didn't even bother with checking out. I didn't care. Another hour on the road, another town, another room. I thought I could outrun it, that maybe it was something tied to that place, that town. But the familiar feeling, the tightness in my chest, never left. It followed me. Every time I tried to leave, to move to somewhere new, it was always there, in the corner of my eye, in the silence of the night, in the air I breathed. It was everywhere and nowhere all at once. And as I stood there, in yet another room, the realization hit me slowly, without surprise. There was no escape. It wouldn't go away. I didn't have to run anymore. I knew that. There was nothing left to do but wait. and when I looked out the window, I could feel it, lingering in the shadow just behind me, always just behind me, like it had always been. It was just waiting for me to understand. I turned from the window, my eyes catching the reflection in the glass. A figure stood just behind me. The voice came, low and clear, as if it had been waiting to speak all this time. "Welcome home." The door clicked shut behind me.